don't need to be distracted by a phone. So welcome everybody. We are live. And Charlotte, I don't know whether you know this. Part of the LinkedIn Live and the Wellbeing chat is I mumble for the first 90 seconds of it, just because I'm not very good with silence, firstly. And it's now become so much part of the kind of process that it's just nice to hear me talk. This is what people tell me anyway.
I think you need to maybe set something, a little game, or I don't know, line your guests up with to tell a joke or something like that. And I say that out loud now, knowing please don't ask me to tell a joke.
Yeah, I'm not going to throw you under the bus. I could do though. But I won't throw you under the bus.
I'm the one that laughs at my jokes, so even if I had one, I can assure you it wouldn't be worth sharing.
Hey, look, I'm empathetic, so I would laugh with you.
I like that. Laugh with me, not at me.
Yeah, with you. It's always with you. I might laugh at you, but you might not know it. Don't worry, I'm the same as you. I always laugh at my own jokes as well. But that's good. How long we got? I normally give people about 90 seconds. So if you are here already and you've joined us, please let us know in the comments so we can see who is joining. If you have any questions, please obviously also ask those. And Charlotte and myself will answer those as best as we can, obviously, or refer you on to some nice resources and data, wherever it might be, to help. But I'm really looking forward to this. I know Charlotte's got a wealth of knowledge in workplace wellbeing, and it'd be interesting to see and hear the comparisons between potentially what the UK are doing and then compared to what the UAE are doing, and how we can always learn, right? I think that's the important part.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's always things that we can learn from each other, and also other industries, not just from like the wellbeing industry or the workplace wellbeing industry. There's so much crossover. And thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to have the conversation. I think it's the more we can shed the spotlight on this kind of topic, the better.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel sure because we both have very similar kind of backgrounds in health. That we'll probably agree and have different elements of sharing knowledge and showcasing bits that people can do. But I know you've now focused a lot around kind of workplace assessments and strategy pieces in the last couple of years, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to dive into that now? Have we started officially? Or we
no,
still
not yet. Let me get my sales pitch out of the way, or my introduction.
I'm like Duracell bunny. You set me off. That's it.
I know. I thought I was a little bit worried about doing that, but hey, look, this is the nice thing about an informal conversation. It doesn't need to be so scripted. So let me just introduce myself quickly for the people who've joined. Because I know there's a few people from your network coming along. So I'm Rich. I'm the founder of Employees Health. I'm a high performance coach helping senior leaders and employees reach their potential. And whenever I say that, it always sounds a bit cheesy, but it's kind of that. We're helping people really achieve their potential, both within a health and wellbeing standpoint, but also as a professional. And I look back and reflect a lot on elite sports as a sports coach and a degree in sports science, try to understand actually how do athletes make sure that they perform at their best, and how can we utilize that into the workplace and as professionals ourselves. But we do more than just coaching. We have a couple of programs and a lot of other kind of workshops and activities that can also support companies. So that's me. That's the boring bit out of the way. Now for the fun part of the session, and it's to hear Charlotte's insights into kind of how we assess well-being and make sure we got our strategies really kind of focused to each individual company. So before I kind of destroy Charlotte's intro, I'm just going to ask you to do that yourself. So please.
Straight off the bat, I have to say, Rich, like that is not the boring bit out of the way. I think it's really important when people hear like, what you said there is like bringing what you've learned from sport and health and top high performance into a workplace, because I think sometimes, especially for people that are not necessarily interested in it, it's interesting to hear how, again, certain disciplines overlap. And I think it's actually really, really interesting. So thank you for sharing your intro. And anyone from my network that's here, I'm sure will appreciate it. So my intro, so obviously, as Richard said, my name is Charlotte Stebbing-Mills. I'm the co-founder of the company The Wellness Theory. Basically, we're a multi-award winning team that specialises in stress relief and collaborative workplace wellbeing solutions, and we're based here predominantly in the UAE. So what led me here? So I joined the world of health and wellness in 2005. So coming up to 20 years, which is a little bit scary. And I did my first specialist qualification in cardiac rehab, which was with the British Association of Cardiac Rehab and Prevention in the UK. And I started working closely with the NHS to transform the lifestyles of heart attack and stroke victims and bridge the gap between medical and commercial health and wellbeing services. So that was where kind of our backgrounds, Rich, kind of crosses over, because it was very much around the preventative side of the coin. I was always like, I wish I could get to, see these people earlier so that we prevent perhaps some of these heart attacks and strokes and other lifestyle challenges due to stress that were coming up. And that was when I really leaned into that kind of commercial health, fitness and wellness side of the well-being. And that led me to move kind of up the classic kind of corporate chain within the commercial fitness space and into different leadership positions. That's what brought me over to the UAE. And I have led teams across UAE, Saudi, Kuwait, Jordan, creating programming for the betterment of well-being. And it's been a really fun job, because I'm very fortunate to have always done something that I really, truly love and believe in. But during that time in leadership, I experienced my own burnout. And this is actually what led me to go down the rabbit hole even further when it comes to stress relief from a more holistic perspective versus the classic of just really focusing on the physical side. And that was really focusing around kind of mental health and emotional well-being, because those were the two elements that were missing on my personal journey that I wish I'd had access to sooner. Those understandings, the awareness, because that got me to a point of hitting absolute rock bottom. I was at the point of wanting to end it all. I was struggling to show up in the way that I knew that I could, and it scared me, to be honest, because I was like, how can this happen? I was always somebody that was, or smiley happy, but behind closed doors I was really struggling. And unfortunately, what I then went on to learn later, after my own kind of recovery and journey into everything I've just mentioned, I recognize that this actually is far more common than we would like to admit. And there's a lot of people struggling with this inside the workplace and outside of the workplace. And that's what's kind of led me here now, is we have the coaching side of our business, which is fantastic for groups and individuals that are really looking to recover and to become healthy, happy, high performers. And then we have the other side of the coin, which is the workplace wellbeing side, which is what obviously you want to jump into today, which is really how do we start to make a lasting change within organizations? Because I think we're leaning in the right direction. I think there's just some easy wins that perhaps we can get along the way to really, really make the difference, both at an individual level within an organization for employees and for the organization itself.
Yeah, no, thank you. There's a few interesting elements there, isn't there, in regards to being on the flip side of the preventative angle of making sure people don't go into these health issues, but being so ingrained in that actually you kind of got there yourself.
Yep.
Through getting into that kind of stage of burnout. So it's really interesting to hear what you've learned. And I presume that will probably lead into a lot of the things we talk about.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. But it'd be interesting to kind of start with, and then we could probably just talk about that introduction and the key parts of all of this. But I think we will still start with kind of what is that? Well, what is the workplace wellbeing or the wellbeing of work? The key. What does it mean to you, I guess, and how is it influencing the organizations?
Yeah, so I just want to touch on something you said there. Is like sometimes we're in it, right, and we can't see the wood through the trees, and we can almost fall into the trap ourselves as individuals. And this feeds into kind of the answer to that question, because often we are in it, we're in work, and we do have demands and we have pressures, and there can sometimes be this notion, well, it won't happen to me, especially if you're highly ambitious, if you're somebody that is driven and wants to do well, and you really are living perhaps with some sort of purpose and you want to make a difference. And it's too easy to notice a bit too late. And that's why workplace wellbeing is so important to me. But what it means to me is actually looking holistically, because I had a period of my career where I wasn't looking holistically. I was looking at the things that I'd been trained and educated in up until that point, right? Really around the physical side of things, nutritional side of things. And as organizations and workplace well-being, often I feel we forget that organizations are just made up of lots of individuals. As simple as that sounds, we forget that individual employees are not only coming in and they've got perhaps financial pressures in their life, or they've got situations with their family, or they've been doing something at the weekend as a hobby and that's like filtered into work somehow, or they haven't slept properly the night before, or there might be some really significant things like crazy storms happening that's now created a world of pressure for people that are now missing important appointments, maybe losing out financially, maybe they are struggling because of like their ceilings caving in right now, and like crazy things like this. And I think we learned through the pandemic that actually individuals need more support, but I think we got a little bit stuck with the solution of, okay, we recognize now that employees are human, and I think we always did, but we recognize it through action, and we've been doing things like putting the yoga classes in, and encouraging nutrition sessions in organizations and things like that, and we're definitely moving in the right direction. But I think we also forget that there is a much deeper piece of the puzzle, and we have what we call a wellness theory, the root level of every human being, which actually is all the things that we can't see. It's all the things like our ability to regulate our emotions, our belief systems, when we actually feel safe as human beings. And I don't mean the classic psychological safety in the workplace. What I mean here is our ability to understand that the way I feel safe might be very different from the way that you feel safe, based on our past experiences, and that our past experiences do actually affect our day-to-day experiences. So when a colleague in the workplace takes something personally, and you think it's because they just didn't sleep that night, actually that could be something very deep rooted that they need support with, that they didn't know they needed support with. So I think, and this is a very long answer to your question, Rich, but I think workplace wellbeing means, when we look at all of it, not just employee wellness, which is those things like sleep, quality of thinking, emotional regulation, nutrition, hydration, financial fitness. We actually then have like the workplace wellbeing side, and often they get lumped together. And the workplace wellbeing side, what that means to me is leadership, it's culture, it's how are we communicating, it's what policies are in place to support employee wellness, what is the environment like, what is the competencies that are actually needed within a role versus ticking boxes, is there a sense of autonomy in the workplace? And thinking about both of those things together, that they're so intertwined, is just so necessary as we continue to move the conversation forward.
Yeah, and I think you make a couple of really good points. I'm going to first pick up on kind of the holistic view and the regards to the roles that the organization plays, what teams also play, and then what the role of the individual. And I had Evelina on last week, who spoke about kind of, when we look at, she terms that as well-being in work, and then there's the individual in wellness, the actions we take, and then the well-being is how we feel about everything else, right? I know it's nice to hear somebody else kind of reiterate that. And I think it's something which over the past kind of 4 years, and I say 4 years just because I think COVID's really accelerated things quite a lot in different ways. And I think that maybe we've just looked at employee wellness rather than, and I think this is where life's changing. I'd be interested to hear where it's like in UAE, but we're now beginning to look at that holistic view of leadership, culture, autonomy, psychological safety, and all those different important aspects, which don't just happen overnight. It's not just like doing a yoga class where that wellness action creates a positive output. These things take a long time to implement and change and actually improve.
And so is employee wellness. Right, employee wellness is also something that takes time, and this is the other, I think, downside to the approach that the random yoga class or the session on stress regulation and stress relief is going to do really well, because actually it might work wonderfully for that 45 minutes, But that's not creating lasting change yet again, because it's not personalised to the people that you're working with and considering all the external factors.
Yeah. And this is, and I'm talking to people now, and I'm like, these workshops we can do, and me, you, and everybody else who delivers fantastic workshops can give all this fantastic information. But it's just awareness, right? In a 45-minute workshop, in a one-off workshop, what else? You build awareness. You might walk away with something and go, okay, I'm going to try that. If you don't know how to try that and implement that and be accountable to somebody, how do you actually make any lasting change? So then how do we then get our people to change? And it's about giving them opportunity to work and become accountable, and as teams, and this is where teams get involved. Also, as organizations, creating a culture and environment that encourages all of this as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, don't get me wrong, employee wellness has its place. I'm a massive advocate for it. At the end of the day, that's been my bread and butter. And that's actually what I'm really passionate about. I would much rather be delivering a session personally on, sleep hygiene and emotional regulation and what is going on at the root level of a human being. I get much more passionate about that than I would about health and safety discussion around the policy piece. And that's why we have people in our team and in our network that deliver those pieces, because it's clearly not something I'm passionate about, but it's got its place, I guess is my point. I don't want to bash the yoga classes and the breathwork sessions and the laughter yoga sessions and things like this, because they are fantastic and they can plant seeds and we can get exposed to things that we might never have been exposed to before. And so long as they're part of a much wider strategy, they are like gold, because they can be the anchor point to a strategy if we can actually zoom out as an organization and as leaders and actually look at, okay, well, how does that link to something else? And that's where I think the opportunity is.
Yeah, but then also, as you said, there could potentially be a barrier to engagement if nothing else is happening.
For sure. Yeah.
No, awesome. Thank you. So how do we assess all of this? So how do you know? So you've got this fantastic view of what workplace well-being is. How do we know what's right?
So here's the thing, right? Sorry, go on.
No. I'm adding to my question where I had to leave it.
No, so I think it's a great question, because right doesn't look the same for every organization, and right doesn't look the same for every organization all of the time. Right changes, right? The only constant is change. And I think we have to acknowledge that if we're really aiming for one specific outcome, then it's highly unlikely that we're going to achieve that thing. So it might not be realistic. And that's where the assessment piece does come into it. So I think, first of all, a company needs to start to look at what are they trying to improve when it comes to employee well-being. Are they trying to improve their productivity and their bottom line? Are they trying to actually improve the well-being of their employees because it's actually the right thing to do? Now, I would love to live in a world where I think that leaders are looking at their P&L and they are thinking, I would rather have healthy humans that don't want to, think about ending their lives. And even if it means that I don't earn as much money this quarter, right? I would love to live in a world where humans come first. Now, I'm not disillusioned. I think we have to entertain both we need to entertain all of it for sure. But I think we have to be specific about why we're doing it in the first place. Are we doing it because the government told us to? Are we doing it because we want to show people that we're a good company to work for versus actually be a good company to work for? So it starts off with an outcome, right? Just like, training and going to the gym. If you've got a goal in mind, the reality is you're more likely to actually achieve what it is. You might get fitter along the way if you don't have a specific goal, but we might miss the original intention in the first place. And that's too easy to do as organizations, because there are so many different areas you can focus on. And like we've already spoken about, workplace wellbeing, employee wellness is a huge topic. And there's so many different ways you can approach it as well. So it can be overwhelming. So typically we see that then we're shooting in the dark to see what it is. So the first point is really understanding, what am I doing this for? What are we as an organization trying to improve? Are we trying to save money? Are we trying to reduce the cost of absences or the cost of presenteeism? Are we trying to improve productivity so that we can save money? and create more revenue? Are we trying to reduce the staff turnover and the amount it costs to hire new people? What is the intention? I think it has to start there. Otherwise, why? Like, what is this all for? It makes no sense. So that's the first bit, because then when you know why, then you know what to measure. Right? If, again, just using the gym metaphor, if you're going to go and train and you want to lose weight, but you're measuring how much weight you can lift, you're not necessarily going to know if you're on track with your goal. So instead of trying to measure everything, like staff turnover, like sick days, like engagement scores and everything, pick the one thing that's related to the intention of why you want to actually invest in this in the first place, and then see what could that return look like by assessing what's already happening within the business. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Start with the why in mind, because that's your North Star at that point, isn't it? And we talk about it. I talk about this with coaching all the time. Whenever I work with somebody as an individual, at the same time, it's, well, without knowing what a direction looks like and what kind of success looks like, then how do you know what decisions to make? How do you know how to overcome barriers and issues? And it's just, and I really like how you kind of leaned into how we kind of create that, and then also then potentially how we assess. And I feel sure we'll get into kind of strategies to assess it anyway in a second. But I think it's so important to understand that with a goal in mind, you can create decisions. You can set that direction.
And you've hit the nail on the head there, because it's the decision making. Right? We can then know how to make decisions, because at the moment, and this isn't anybody's fault why I think this is happening. I think we're all in this boat somehow, is understanding our buying process. Even if we look at ourselves as individuals, why do we buy what we buy, really? Sometimes it's logical, sometimes it's emotional. But when we're trying to buy something for an organization, many people, and we've got pressure, and perhaps there's somebody else telling you need to buy this thing, you need to invest in well-being because now is something that's important for whatever reason. Who has taught people who are championing well-being how to buy in this region, in this industry? Who's been shown the buying process? It's like if we went to book a holiday, right? We do some research, right? We look at, okay, where do we want to go? What's the goal? What's the intention? Do I want some sunshine? Do I want some skiing? Like, what's the reason why? And then we go down the rabbit hole and we start to look. We go through this buying process, and it's the same when it comes to well-being offerings as well. But nobody's taught us how to do that. And I think the first step you've already covered beautifully by a great question at the start is like, what is workplace well-being? What is the picture? What is the landscape? What are my options of my holiday destinations? What are my options to improve well-being? And then we can start to look at, okay, let's now make a decision and implement an assessment piece.
Yeah, I think you just made it really clear. It's like, actually, you can still have you can have two different goals, right? You can have a goal which is improving workplace well-being, which is this one side of the coin. But you can also have a goal of actually improving employee wellness. Yeah, and I know they can collaborate really well. And if you look after this one, then you can collaborate employee wellness in. But I guess you probably can't you can kind of create a better, healthier team, but you might not be improving the psychological safety, the culture, the place to work without the other, I guess. But
that's really interesting what you said there, because the way I see that and the way your hands are moving, I see this as an infinity sign, right? Apologies for any listeners that have heard me say this. I always say this, that it's like this infinity, because it's all intertwined, right? The employee wellness, we can't always treat it completely separately. But what you just said there is really important, because you said, like, we can have workplace well-being and we can improve those things, and that will have a positive effect on employee wellness, but a massive effect on employee wellness. If we only focused on employee wellness and not workplace well-being, I don't think we see the same levels of return. So, and then this is where I think we've had it a little bit back to front, where we've been doing the employee wellness stuff, which is very well intentioned, which is amazing, but actually what's going to reap the higher rewards is likely to be the workplace well-being things. Because if I know that, my team are not going to be stressed out, then they're not going to be struggling to sleep at night, most probably, and not because of the workplace, at least. And I think that's the choice point that we're at now.
Yeah, and I think when I reflect back, and I've been in the workplace wellbeing field for 5 years, and so I had a year of it before COVID. But when COVID hit, it was very much employee wellness, because everybody was so dispersed, and actually that was the focus, was to make sure that our employees were well. Right. But now, as we begin to come out of that, in like the last 1 to 2 years, actually have we actually shifted away from that wellness section and gone into this workplace wellbeing section to create a better place? And I think actually in the UK we kind of are, because actually this employee wellness section is beginning to slow down, and there's a lot of other kind of things causing that to happen, or decisions which are slowing this the employer buy-in stuff down. But now we might be looking at this workplace well-being bit, the holistic view of culture, senior leadership teams, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing here as well in the UAE. It is mirroring across from UK, UAE. That we're not. I don't think we're moving away from employee wellness, but we're definitely moving towards workplace wellbeing, which is fantastic. And I think it's going to be most powerful when they're intertwined and we actually start to understand that they're two different things and used interchangeably. Because I think the pressure that we have is that I love the UAE. I love it so much, and it develops so quickly and it accelerates. When it decides something, it's like go, and that is incredible. And you know anybody that's been a part of this region, some way, shape, or form, can see that in many different industries. But we're also seeing that in our behaviors. So we've got organizations like, yes, we love this, we understand it, well-being is important, we want our teams to be healthy, let's buy something quick and let's get it in. Let's listen to what our teams say that they want, and they want this yoga session, they want this exercise session. And it's like, great, but are you giving the time to do it? Is what they want what they need? I was having this conversation with a brilliant colleague earlier today, who I'll mention actually when we speak about the assessment piece. And we were saying that it's important to consider what your teams wants, because you want to show that you're listening. And if they're excited about that thing, we can't ignore it. But at the same time, we have to entertain both of the conversations, because not only do we want to do things fast, sometimes without thinking, we also want to do it within a certain budget. And sometimes, the things that are not obvious and shiny that you can show is a little bit harder to justify investment for so early on. They want to show the employees what they're doing, which I love. And again, it's very well intentioned, but actually the thing that might be the highest leverage point may actually be something that they're unaware of yet. And I think, again, that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah. And I think there's so many different elements of that, isn't there, as well? And when you're asking, when you engage in data, it's a very much, how do I feel right now? And you can get that response. And so there's going to be elements where you implement wellness bits, again, which gets an interest straight away. And this is where I wrote it down, actually. The only constant is change, but that could change, right? And actually what they're interested in will always change. So actually, when you look at the wellbeing piece, creating a culture, your culture shouldn't change. People might do, but the culture should be the thing which combines them together.
Culture change is interesting, right? If I sleep well one day and I don't sleep well the next day, it's a very quick change, isn't it? But culture, yes, there are red flags along the way if your culture is shifting, but you've got time to catch it. Whereas in the wellness piece, it's a lot harder to catch it, which is why when it comes to assessments, if you're going to use employee wellness assessments, they have to be fast in turnaround. They have to be speedy, and they have to be not just the moment of assessment through to understanding the data, but also then the implementation, the action after it. It has to be very, very fast if it's going to be useful.
100%. And I've worked with companies who take forever turning some of this stuff down around. Anyway, side note. Okay, so let's get into this kind of strategies for assessment. How do we assess this stuff?
Yeah, so there's different ways. You can do it very, very simply by, like I said earlier, is looking at some key metrics and then implementing some changes, checking your metrics, did it work? And that can be things like sick days, engagement scores, but you're going to be looking over a long period of time, right, to see that. And sometimes if you're trying lots of things at once, it'll be very hard to then see what sticks. So that is typically the way people do it. They're like, right, we want to improve engagement. Let's do a bunch of wellness sessions, or let's change and do a team building or a team coaching session, and then see if the number changes. And there's almost this tumbleweed period where it's like, is it working? Is it not working? So there's that way of doing it, which is typically what a lot of people do if they are thinking about how can they measure, right? Mm-hmm. But what we're finding is if we can measure and assess, and it can still be through surveys, but if we can assess the right areas. Now, I said to you earlier about like the workplace well-being side and the employee wellness side. There are different people that can measure things in different ways, and I can only speak from my own experience. So here at Wellness Theory, we measure the 10 key pillars of employee wellness, and we do that through a assessment, but also through on-site focus groups, dependent on the organisation side, needs and turnaround. And we also allow organizations to add their own questions to that based on their specific goals and reasons why they want to do it. So there's an element of the assessment that asks what they finds out what they need, and then asks what they want. And then we bring it back into what is the goal of the actual organization and how does that fit into its mission, vision, and values. But when we do that, when we are asking questions about wellness, and one of the reasons we do this employee wellness scorecard sometimes is really to show them that that's not what they need. So a lot of times companies will come to us and say, okay, we want to do this stress workshop or a breathwork workshop, for example. And we say, okay, great. Why? What strategy is this part of? Like, if it's part of strategy already, fantastic. Done. We're in there. The team's out there doing it. And it's fantastic. But when we ask that question often, it's like, well, I'm not sure why we really want that. So it's like, okay, well, why don't we find out? So we typically will send out the wellness scorecard, and we will find out what are the key areas that employees might be struggling with when it comes to the pillars of emotional regulation, quality of thinking, mental health, all of those kinds of things. And then what we do is we give them the space within this to actually give feedback on what they would like to see change. And rarely do people say it's the breathwork class or the stress relief workshop, right? What they're really saying is, I spend all my time in meetings and I can't get my actual job done, so I end up staying late. Then I don't see my kids when I get home, and now I feel guilty and I feel bad, and I don't sleep at night, and I'm checking my email because my boss is saying something to me. And it's like, they're the things that need to change, right? So the root cause stuff, which typically falls under the systemic side, the workplace well-being. So we actually, most of the time, use employee wellness scorecards to highlight what needs to change within workplace well-being. One of the reasons we do that is because we need to meet people where they are, because we have a lot of buyers in this region who are really passionate and brilliant about championing wellbeing programs, but they are still looking for a certain solution. Until we can show them the data and say, you wanted to spend this amount of money on this, your employees are telling you this is what needs focus, and this doesn't cost money. Right? And it's like, this is just a decision that needs to change. And from there, you can then dig deeper into deeper assessments. And that's where a workplace wellbeing assessment comes in very, very handy.
Okay, just give me a second to take it all in. Because there is a lot there in regards to the different forms of a kind of assessment. And what's really, I mean, for me, it's what's really interesting is it comes back to, if you ask your people what the real issue and to what's affecting their well-being and how they feel, because remember, that's part of what well-being is how they feel, then it's going to come back for I don't know, the majority, a high percentage, a high average would be actually the work they are doing. For the majority. And then it's from there how then you make changes from there.
Yeah, exactly. And if you listen,
adding more stuff, you're adding more wellness stuff into their well-being day or their day, that actually probably puts more stress onto that person, or more strain, maybe not stress, but more strain onto that person, or they just don't buy in, and then the engagement's crap. And you're seeing that as well.
100%. That's I think we'll probably get into maybe the engagement piece in a little while, but I think the thing that you've said there around the wellness piece, like trying to fit it into their well-being day, like and it adds more stress. It absolutely does. And part of one of the surveys that we do is like we'll get the employees to highlight some of the symptoms that they might feel to be able to see if there are any red flags for burnout. And more often than not, we go back to leadership teams and say 50% of your team are, at like stage 6 of burnout. If we don't do something soon, you're going to start to see those numbers shift. And, and more often than not, there are at least a handful of people that are in the higher stages as well that are at high risk. And that can sometimes be a scary statistic to see. But then with that next to what your team actually want and say are the challenges, it then becomes a lot easier to make decisions because we've actually paused for a moment, we've taken a moment to ask. And that's when you can look at the workplace wellbeing type of surveys. And the colleague that I mentioned earlier is Bobby Hartshorn from Wellwise. She'll be a great guest for you actually, Rich, for sure. She dives deep into all of those elements that we spoke about earlier around kind of benefits, rewards, leadership, autonomy. She looked at all of those different elements, and it's a fantastic assessment tool that I think anybody should go and take a look at, because it will really help again guide the ship and guide the decision making, because only then, once we've assessed, then we can design, then we can engage, then we can optimize it. Right now, if we want to buy it, we don't want to design it, we want to buy it, we want people to engage, and then we want it to be amazing. It's like the strategy piece in my eyes is we assess, we design strategically, obviously through the assessment results, then we actually engage people by, like you said earlier, getting buy-in. Now they've shared their feedback, we have to act on it, we have to listen, right? If I tell you I've been in meetings all the time, and the thing that's going to help me is if I'm not in meetings and I have maybe an afternoon a week with no meetings whatsoever, but yet you ignore that and now you tell me to go to a stress workshop, well, now we've got an even bigger problem.
Another meeting.
Another meeting, but we've got a bigger problem that the organization is now not listening. Now they're not feeling supported. Now they're feeling unheard, and that's like a slippery slope into disengagement.
And then it's also not about them adding something else, which is also not listening. But it's also not listening or actually engaging with what they're being told. Exactly. Like, you can see it, and you have seen it, and I've seen it as well, where you kind of come back and you hear, this is what's going on. But that's a long process. We don't want a long process. We want a quick fix. Or actually, we can't do that. We don't have the time. Or actually, sometimes the budget's not there for people to go and learn how to create a better culture, because that takes a long time to get that buy-in. So saying just like, how do we? Because just saying, look, we're going to take away meetings, but actually people need to learn how to implement that, what that means, how we create that culture. And it's a bigger piece of work than going in and delivering a 60-minute workshop. Exactly.
And I get why we don't, right? Because it's busy, right? And what is demanding is whatever's happening in the business today, right? For us, Rich, we're talking about well-being all day long. Most people are not. Most industries are not. They're focused on whatever they're passionate about, whatever their goals are as a business and their technical skills. So I completely get it. But this is where we have to come back to the why are we trying to attempt this in the first place? Is it to show? And just to, you have this shiny thing that we can say that we do as an organization, but for what reason? Because if we really go back to the why, the data does show there was some data that came from the ITA group about medical costs falling. And it was something like for every $1 spent, they saved like $3. Now, to an organization, that can be very, very powerful. Is that then worth putting the extra time in? If we took that extra couple of dollars, right, and then invested that per employee into the wellbeing programs, that by itself will just start to create a profitable ecosystem for them over time, and that compounding effect. And any good leader that's running a P&L would like to see a compounding effect, I'm sure, with their results. So it is a bit of a paradox, but I think we're at a point where the choice needs to be made and we need to start to align with why and just pause. I would rather somebody does nothing for 3 months while they think about this and they understand it and they learn it and then accelerate, right? Do the thing that the UAE is amazing at, then put your foot down. But
100%.
yeah, I don't know, we are.
I just want to dive into your assessment bit for a little bit longer. I know we obviously like to have a chat because we're driving through this time nice and quickly. But your assessment piece, what are your 10 kind of key employee wellness elements you measure, and what else are you built into your measurement tools?
Yeah, so like I said, we've got some optional bits. So I mentioned some of them earlier. So in terms of the employee wellness piece, we're looking at movement habits. We're looking at breathing efficacy. We're looking at sleep hygiene, nutrition, hydration, quality of thinking, emotional regulation, social connection, and the relationship to the environment, and financial fitness. Mm-hmm. But part of that as well, so they're the 10 pillars. Right? They're the things that we measure every time, no matter what. Then we have the early signs of burnout. We don't share it in that way of saying like, which stage of burnout are you at? We scatter the symptoms within to see what the common themes are, to be able to understand what a general picture is that the data is telling us. But then what we do is what we do with that information that's important. That's when we start to look at what's happening in each gender, what's happening within certain age groups, what's happening within certain departments. And that's where we start to see patterns occur. So we might start to see that we've got our millennials that are feeling undervalued and are trying to significantly work to prove themselves, right? And why are they trying to prove themselves? When we look a bit deeper, so after the assessment, we have this information, we'll go in that layer deeper and understand why through focus groups and meetings. Everybody that has an employee wellness assessment with us gets the opportunity to speak to one of our wellbeing consultants in complete confidentiality as well. And then we can start to understand the challenges at a much deeper level. But when we start to look at that, then we can understand, okay, well, why are the millennials in this organization, in this department feeling this way? And we look, and actually there's some age and like different paradigms these people are living in when it comes to the leadership and the employees. It's like, okay, what needs to change? Do our millennials need to be a little bit more aware of how Gen Xers work? Do Gen Xers need to understand a little bit more how the millennials work, and so on? Like, we start to see the patterns, and often that highlights then what do we need to focus on? Is it communication? A lot of the time it is, for sure. Is it about clear roles and responsibilities? Is it that we need to look at a specific department before we look at anywhere else? Is it that we need to bring in a team to look specifically at the medical side of things, right? Because we're not clinical. We are not clinical background. We are a wellness background. So for some organizations, if those symptoms of burnout and those red flags are showing high, we'll bring in somebody clinical to come and support the team and do a much deeper assessment. So it just highlights, it's very top level. Let's highlight and look at what the picture is, and then continue to go down the rabbit hole based on what the data is telling us. And that's when you start to find out what's really going on.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that. And it seems like quite a intensive and kind of good way to grab a holistic view.
It sounds like big and intensive, but it doesn't take long to do. There's a certain amount of time. Okay, cool. So there's a certain amount of time that the window to complete the assessment is. Typically, it's either around 5 days, depending on the size of the organisation and the communication channel of that organisation. And then the turnaround from the data is no more than 5 days after that. So we've got like a snapshot of what's going on within the business. And I think that's sometimes a lot better and more efficient, because 5 days after that, we can already have gone deeper to understand the issues. Within 15 days, we already know what needs to shift. And typically, yes, people will answer those questions based on how they're feeling on the day they answer it. It is framed to be answered based on how you've been feeling over a period of time. But typically in 15 days, nothing drastic usually happens. That we all have dominant patterns, dominant moods, and we can pick up on those throughout the assessments. So the quick turnaround is really, really, really important, because I think the snapshot quickly sometimes is better than the ask all of those questions, wait 3 months, you've got a new team in now, right? Half of them have left. So it's like, okay, well, I'll wait. Yeah.
Speed is key on how people feel, I think. There are other. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say that there's some great tools as well. That like there's some fantastic apps now that will give you real-time data. That you'll have a wellbeing app. Click whatever smiley, whatever emoji it is that you've got, and as a manager, you can go in and you can see this is the mood of my team. These things exist, but unless we pause to have a look and do our research, like we're picking our holidays, like we're not going to be able to really see what's available to us.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well. Like, there are tons of different apps which will allow you. So I work in a coaching app who allows you to be on there. They can gauge data, but also then there's confidentiality of coaching in there as well. But they can gauge some of the key data of how you feel, how you're moving, etc., which is a really nice kind of assessment tool in regards to wellness, but also gives them some support. There's a company, Omnifia, who can actually link into the operating systems, who can figure out what burnout and engagement is, the amount of emails they get in, all that kind of overwork and stuff like that. But they can give you different bits. There's some really good tools out there which we can optimize. And I love the way you finished on that is if you don't know where you're going and what you're trying to achieve, then where do you start?
Exactly.
So nice way to bring that back. Good job.
I think this is a complex topic, and sometimes we simplify it with good intentions, but it's not going to create the lasting change, and that's what we need.
100%. Let's talk about lasting change. We're going to jump onto leadership for the last little kind of section and nugget. How do we get leadership championing this, and how do we create that buy-in, get them to buy in?
I think if the door's already open a little bit, a slither, and this is even being mentioned in an organisation, you're in with a shot. If we've got people listening to this and it's just not even being whispered in the corridors by anyone, and there's nobody willing to champion it, including whoever's watching this, but I doubt they probably are if they're 46 minutes in. But if we are passionate about it, we can drive it. And I mean that not just at senior leadership, I mean at individual leadership as well. I truly believe that this is a shared responsibility between individuals, leadership, the whole organisation. And I think it can start anywhere. I've had and worked with, people have approached me to work with their company from like the ground level. They're like, I'm really passionate about this. I want to bring it to my organisation. How do I do it? That nobody's supporting me. So the first point for somebody like that is really finding your allies. There will be more people around you that care about it. Maybe not enough to really drive it home, but the fact that that person reached out to me, they can. So start with self. What does that look like? Maybe that does start with employee wellness. Maybe that does start with asking some questions or putting in some suggestions. You don't even have to use the word well-being, but if you can have a communication with a line manager that says, did you realize that actually Bob over there didn't get to see his kids for the last 2 weeks because he's been overworked, or he's like really stressed out, or he had to go to the doctors before, or something like that. You know, it can just start to plant some seeds for leadership. So if we're at that point, start with self. If we do have a leadership team who are open, we need to show it from a logical perspective, a financial perspective, an emotional perspective, and show the benefits. We have to be able to show the benefits across the business as best we can. And that comes back to the why. What is important to the organisation? If the organisation is passionate about sustainability, how can we include well-being as part of that mission, right? How can we tie it in, right? It's the same with anything. If we want to, if we want to get fit, it's much more fun for some people if they bring a friend along and they do two things at once, right? They're now socializing and they're achieving their fitness goal, right? It's like two birds with one stone. It's the same thing here. It's like, what is the organization already doing that we can start to weave well-being into? How can we start to integrate it rather than being this separate thing that's going to be this massive project? How do we start to weave it into something that already exists? And I think that is again, a huge opportunity that perhaps we don't look at adding it in. We try and add it on. problem.
I love that. I made notes. I enjoyed the kind of 3 sections: the logical, the financial, and the emotional side of things, and how you can buy into those and educate those. I think it's really important, and then linking to the values and the vision, what the organisation are.
Yeah,
I thought was kind of a really good way of being able to sell to leadership.
I think having the understanding the context, like we've just talked about today in this session, there's a lot of context from the earlier conversation around what is employee wellness, what is workplace wellness, what is the relationship between the two, and then what is the relationship with that and where the business is going, what is the relationship with that and where we've been, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And when we can start to provide that context before we go in for the ask, well, now we've actually got something solid. We've got a foundation that we can now work from. And often what we see is a lot of perhaps mid-level leaders that are passionate about this, but they often feel quite powerless, that they can't position it or pitch it. And as soon as they start to be able to provide context, then it becomes easier, because now the whoever's making the decision isn't now understanding what's in it for them. Right. And that's a big part of what you said earlier, actually, Rich, is how do we involve employees in the experience so they're engaged? And if we can involve them based on what's important to them in their role professionally, but also personally, well, now it's an easy convert. You know, the way I picture an employee wellness session, for example, to somebody in IT is going to be very different to perhaps the way I picture it to the Wellbeing champion, right? It's going to be very different. And I think, again, we forget that individuals make up the organization. And if we just remember that we're individuals and we all want to know what's in it for us, then we can kind of adapt our messaging and our conversation and the way that we're pitching to champion something to the person. So meet the people where they are, I guess, based on where you are.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. So, as I told you just before we jumped on, we thank you for sharing all this insights. It'd be nice to hear what your top 3 tips are to finish the session nicely for people to take away.
Yeah. So you say you told me before, like 2 minutes before, so you're going to get these off the cuff completely. So I think first thing is understanding the why, right? And I think this is more of a summary of what we've talked about today, is understanding the why. Why are you trying to champion well-being within your organization, or why are you not? Right? Understanding that, because without understanding those elements, you're not going to move forward. I think that's critical. So reflect on why. Speak to the people around you within the organization. For example, if somebody's watching this and they're feeling maybe on their own that they're trying to champion something and it's not getting any legs, it's probably because it's in their mind and they already see the benefit and where it is, but you've got to take them on a journey to get there. So start speaking to them, understanding where they are so you can meet them where they are. And the third one is pause and do the research. Speak to people that do this stuff. There's so many of us that are passionate about this, that are experiencing this and have the expertise in this. Like you said earlier, there's abundance of tools, but understand it first before you buy. Don't buy because boss says I have to. Don't buy because I want to be seen to be doing something well. Don't buy because it'll make you feel good. This is another common thing I've seen, is that a lot of people champion wellness programs within the organizations do it because they love wellness. So they pick all the things that they might love. They don't pick what, again, the people around them might want and need. So I think doing the research, understanding and listening is critical.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I actually, as soon as we started and you spoke about the goal and the why, I wrote down why at the very bottom to where I would normally write these kind of points as the number one thing. And I just knew that was going to be the thing that leads all of this. And the thing I'm going to add to it, and I think that these are all great tips, is I think understand if you're focusing on employee wellness or workplace wellbeing.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, why will help with that, but understand, are you focusing on wellness or are you focusing on the culture?
Yeah, exactly.
And that will also help.
Yeah.
We've got a question. Somebody's here, Jasper. Why are you championing well-being in your organization versus why are you not? yeah, that's a great takeaway. Thank you for sharing that, Jasper. Can you see that?
I can't see it. No.
No, the comment is just, Jasper has just said why you. So your comment around why you championing wellbeing in the organisation versus why you are not is a really great takeaway.
Yeah, I think it's critical. If we don't know the reason why we're doing things, then why are we doing any of it? What's the point? It's just making it up as we go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Charlotte, I really appreciate you joining me and sharing all this insight. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn, Charlotte Stebbing Mills, and thewellnesstheory.com are the easiest places to go. And there's different assessments that you can do already just to see where you are right now. And you're always open to obviously having a conversation as well anytime. So just drop a DM or anything like that. And even myself, one of the team will come back to you.
Lovely. You can also listen to Charlotte's podcast on Spotify.
Thanks.
Wellness Theory, where I'm on there as well. So if you like listening to me ramble along, perfect. That's recorded. It's going to be recorded. We'll be on Spotify as well. We'll be on YouTube. We'll be on here as a recording as well. And for sure, we'll probably share bits out of it. I know you will because you edit way more than I do. So, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing what comes next. Stay where you are, though. Everybody else. Next week, I am with Kate Hyam from Born Social talking about how to create a fantastic culture within a B Corp organisation. So a bit more of a small to medium sized org. And that's going to be some really insights. She's got some cool bits in place where they are. So it'd be great to, if you want to learn about what you can do, please join. Otherwise, have a great weekend and a great week and a great few months. Speak to you all soon. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Rich.